Right, now we are now going to skip over from humanity and engineering over to robots. We're really pleased to have Catherine here. She's a VP of Medical Research from Intuitive Surgical, and she is a physician with engineering background, and she evaluates emerging technologies for incorporating into surgical robots. She leads a very interesting life, and I can't really imagine what the world to you looks like in 2034, because I can really hardly imagine your everyday life as it is. But thank you very much for joining us. I look forward to what you have to say. Please join me in welcoming Catherine.
Thank you very much. And we'll do the quicko change here. There we go. All right. So healthcare in 2034 is what I thought I would tackle, but I think it's generally a good idea to know where you are coming from and know where you are right now, because as Sherry mentioned, a lot of the things that I do today may seem like science fiction. So I'll bring you through some of the technologies that we have going on right now, and then also where I think that may take us. Part of what I want to talk about also is how you may think of medical technology as moving very slowly. It's a highly regulated environment. And yet there are very disruptive changes that come from adjacent technologies. We see huge changes in electronics, in information processing, and these are the sorts of things that are driving big changes within medicine. Not necessarily changes in medicine itself, but getting disrupted from adjacent technologies. And this is something that we've seen over and over again in medicine. So to start looking towards the future, I'm going to start you in 1800. And this is a graph from Hans Rosling's excellent Gapminder. And along the bottom is income per person, GDP per capita, and it's normalized to today's numbers. And along the left, we see life expectancy. And so that's ranging from 20 down at the bottom up to 85. And color-coded, so Europe in blue, you can see sort of has an early lead out in 1800, but really not by that much. And the Americas in red, Africa in yellow, and Asia in green. Now, when you move to 1900, and we've got the Industrial Revolution going on, you're starting to see a little bit of a change in response to increasing GDP per capita. But this is largely a triumph of public health. This is increasing money, gives you better access to sanitation and clean water, and better food. But you can draw a pretty straight line that sort of shows that as you get wealthier, your general health improves. It's still very telling, though, that at this point, there are barely any countries that have an average life expectancy that's over 50. In 1900, everyone is still sitting down with an average life expectancy below 50, which would be a pretty sobering thought to many of the people in the room, myself included, because we'd be staring mortality in the face. But you go after World War II, and something has changed. 1950, that line has moved. And this is the beginning of vaccination. This is the beginning of antibiotics. What we're seeing is not so much a change in economics, but a change in medical technology. And we move to 2012, and we're now in the world of modern medicine. So even countries that have the same GDP per capita that those countries back in 1900 had, those that have been left behind economically, have not been left behind from the point of view of healthcare. And it's equally telling that now we draw that 50-year average life expectancy line, and there are barely any countries that are below it. This is 100 years of change, and in a lot of cases, even those very poor countries are still getting vaccines. Vaccines save lives. Period, end of story, and they do not cause autism. Thank you very much. Antibiotics also save lives. And when we are looking at bringing these kinds of technologies to bear, these are the sorts of things that are raising the average bar. But alone, they are not going to do what we saw happen. We also saw the rise of interventions from the early technologies of anesthesia and imaging bring us now one of my favorite technologies, surgical robotics and big imaging. And you could say, there's going to be a little bit of surgery in this video, so just be warned, but just a little bit. This is the business end of the Da Vinci robot, and this is why it's called intuitive. When you move the controllers, the surrogate little metal hands on the inside of the body are doing exactly the same motion that the surgeon's hands are making. This allows you to do things like repair the heart from the inside through small incisions in between the ribs, rather than cracking open the sternum. It allows you to do abdominal surgery without making a big incision. And so as we move into this, we start to think of, we're in the era of big medicine. We're in the era of big interventions. We've been bringing in more and more technologies as we've been going on, and our life expectancy has been increasing. But not all of the triumphs of modern medicine are apparent to us today. As we have been getting better at keeping ourselves alive longer, we haven't been taking terribly good care of ourselves in the process. And a lot of the problems that we're facing in medicine today have to do with the burden of chronic disease. We have been able to do the big interventions to keep ourselves alive. We're able to do those early interventions to let ourselves grow up, but we still have some more growing up to do as far as managing the entire person. And so I go from this to a bit of an eye chart. I apologize, but I tend to think about medicine in three big pillars: prevention, diagnostics, and finally intervention. I live solidly in the world of intervention when we make surgical robots, but you really only need intervention when prevention has failed. What we're also doing when we're at intervention is we are intervening in the disease state of the patients that come to us with various sorts of diseases. And so when I look out to 2030, I need to understand how that's going to change. I need to understand how to stay relevant in terms of intervention if the population that's coming in terms of in need of healthcare is changing. And why is this going to change? So I live solidly out here in surgery at the far end of interventions. But in the green on this are some of the technologies that are changing exponentially and are really going to move what it is that we're doing in surgery around quite a bit. So these technologies here, ranging from the healthy cities movement and agricultural policy, if that's not terribly readable, wearable tech, where we're starting to get large numbers of data streams in terms of the general population out there, biomarkers, genomics and proteomics, imaging agents in the world of high acuity data, and finally robotics and regenerative medicine and high-tech prosthetics out in the end of intervention. And so if we look at diagnostics, diagnostics has the potential for changing things very, very radically. And that's primarily because stage matters. And what I mean by that is the state of the disease, how far progressed it is, when you actually do come to the attention of the medical establishment and you have an intervention, the earlier we find it, the better the outcomes are. So this is a survival curve for gastric cancer. And if you're found at stage 4, there's not really a whole lot that we can do for you, even with a very fancy surgical robot. The disease state is still going to kill you. If we can find it at stage 1, it's surgically curable. And so a lot of the technologies that I think that are going to radically change medicine are in the diagnostics area. So this is a dog's nose. Dogs have been shown to be able to smell cancer on people's breath. And we didn't really know what it was that they were sensitive to. They were classifiers. You could say, this person has cancer, this person doesn't, and the dog could learn the difference. But now we've got companies like Owlstone, which is out of the UK here, in fact, I think out of the Cambridge community, which is looking at FAMES, field asymmetric ion mobility spectroscopy, in order to be able to differentiate between all of the different compounds in the breath and be able to detect lung cancer like those dogs. We're also seeing groups out of New Zealand, this one's out of New Zealand, that's looking at genetic signature detection on various different sorts of cancer. They have a product that is looking at bladder cancer, but also doing prognostic indication on cancers. And then, of course, there's Google X, which has just let us know that there's going to be these little nanobots that you put in your bloodstream and grab onto cancer cells and sort of bring them for inspection. So I can't wait to see what happens with that. And then there's groups like Miraculous, which are looking at microRNAs to do early cancer detection. It doesn't really matter which one of these succeeds first. If all the cancers we find are the size of a pea, then surgical robots will not be necessary to do these big salvage surgeries, these big reconstructions. The kinds of things that I need to be making need to be doing small interventions. We need to move out of the realm of the large intervention into the small intervention. And so we move up into imaging. And what can we do with imaging as we look out? And this is ovarian cancer. And this is ovarian cancer tagged with a near-infrared fluorescent molecule that allows me to see it with high contrast. And so if I can find my way to the cancer, if I can, when I'm looking at it, see it glowing in there. Now, this is a lymph node getting taken out, but you can tag cancers and lymphatics with these same sorts of things and be able to be absolutely sure you're getting it all out. Then we are going from the realm of big interventions into the realm of small interventions. So we move from that into robotics and regenerative medicine and high-tech prosthetics. Where are we moving in that direction? And right now, we are growing simple organs in the lab. We've lived longer than the design life, but we continue to sag and tear and wear out and need to be able to replace bits and pieces as we go along. And so even though cancer may disappear as a large surgery, I tend to think of myself as being more in the spare parts business in 2034, where we'll grow you a new kidney and install it. We also will be changing the scale of the surgeries that we're operating. Right now, surgeries are at this scale because this is why we've developed them for this tool. But there is plenty to do at the cellular level, or even just at the 30 micron level, which is a third of the acuity that a human hand can get. But still, I could do real work on the back of the retina and save someone's sight. Some very exciting things are coming down the pipe. This is a pacemaker that's the size of a grain of rice. And it's possible because we don't need a battery for it anymore, because we can get near-field coupling and be able to charge it directly inside the body even when it's fairly deep inside. So I'm thinking I'm going to put these everywhere. And 2034, I may be part of the group that's taking the DNA apart and putting it back together again. So as we look at these technologies, and as we think also in terms of the exponential changes in artificial intelligence, I digitize the steps of surgery. Once I can have something like Doc Watson over my shoulder giving me advice during the process of surgery, we can really improve on medical errors as well. So I think of robots as being kind of the central technology onto which all of these platforms, all of these different platform technologies rest. And right now, these are kind of the near-term things with advanced instrumentation. But by 2034, we're going to be putting in radically new technologies, and we're going to move from the era of big interventions into the era of small interventions, just timely. Thank you very much.